Hello and welcome. In this video, we are going to learn file input and output in modern Android app development. Now in previous video, I have covered how to save the file in your internal storage of your Android application. But in this video, I will be covering how to save and read file in our external storage of Android phones. So to save the file on external storage, there are two APIs, which is MediaStore API and Storage Access Framework API. This video will be focused on the MediaStore API. And the next video will be focused on the Storage Access Framework API. You can use any one of these API to save the file in external storage depending on your use cases. So with that said, let's get started. So what is MediaStore API? In Android, if you want to read or write any file to the external storage, the app don't have the direct access to any of the files and folders on the external storage space. Why? Because of the security and privacy reason. So if you want to save any file on external storage, then you have to use the MediaStore API, because MediaStore API is like a middleman between the Android operating system and your own application. For example, if you want to save a file to the download folder, then instead of directly having your app the access to the download folder, you have to use the middleman, which is a MediaStore API, and tell the MediaStore API to save the file to the download folder. And that's the basically mechanism of all the MediaStore API. You can use the MediaStore API to read and write any files on your external storage, but there is one catch. You cannot have access to all the folders on external storage. MediaStore API only gives you access to the public folder on the external storage. Now what are the public folders on external storage space? Public folders such as downloads, photos, videos, music or documents, these folders are considered as a public folder in an Android device. So your application only has access to this public folder. If you want to create and store a file apart from the public folder, then you don't have the direct access to it using the MediaStore API. So keep in mind that while using MediaStore API, you only have access to the public folders. Now let's look at the example. Now here I have made a sample demo application to show you the demo of how to save a file to a downloads folder. So here in a text box, I will write the content to the file. We can write any content such as hello world. So I have wrote the content hello world in a text box, and we will save this content to the file and save that file into the downloads folder. I will click on the button save to the downloads. Now this will save the file to the downloads folder. Now let's go back and check if your file is saved or not. I will open the files app. After opening files app, my_new_file.txt. This is the file which we have recently created and saved to the downloads folder. Now let's go back to the app and read the content of our file. Now let's read the content from the file which is stored in our downloads folder. I will click the button read from the downloads, and this will read the content from the file and display it, which is a hello world, which we have written and saved to the file. So this is how we save and read file using MediaStore API. Now let's jump into the code to understand how it works. So now let's understand how to save that file into the downloads folder. Now while using the MediaStore API, you also have to use the ContentProvider API. Previously, I have made entire video to teach you how ContentProvider API works. You can watch that video given in the link in description below after watching this video. So first thing is we will use the ContentProvider API and get the ContentResolver. After getting ContentResolver, now next is we have to mention the name of the media columns. Now since we are using the ContentProvider API, each and every content is stored in a table format. So when we use ContentProvider API, we have to tell the API that we have to modify this name of the column for the content. So the first column is the media column name display name, which is the name of the file. And second column is the MIME type, which is the type of the file, which is a plain text file. And third is the relative path media column, which is a downloads folder, and we will save all of these name of the media column into the values, which are content values. Now next is we will use the ContentResolver.insert. This insert will add the file into the ContentProvider API, and this is the most important part, that we will use MediaStore.downloads.external content_UI. So here we use the MediaStore API to tell the content provider that we have to save the file into the downloads folder, which is a public folder. And then we will add the values, which are basically the column names. So this is how we tell the content provider API that we have to save this file into the downloads folder. So after adding this line ContentResolver.insert, this will create a file into our downloads folder with the file name. And after creating the file, it will return a URI. URI means a universal resource identifier. Now after creating the file, now next step is to write the content into the file. We will use the URI to write the content into the file. We will use ContentResolver.openOutputStream. Now OpenOutputStream is important because with the help of OpenOutputStream, we write the content into the file. So once we get the output stream, we will use a stream.write and then add a content.2byte array. Since we want to write the data into the file, we can't write that simple text format. We have to convert the text format into the byte array, which is a byte format. Content is simply a string format, and here we are converting that string format into a byte array to save that data into the file. After writing OpenOutputStream and write the data into the file, the data is saved safely into the file, which is stored in our downloads folder. So this is how we write the data into the file and save it in a downloads folder. Now let's understand how to read the data from that file which is stored in a downloads folder. So just like previously, we will use ContentResolver. After getting ContentResolver, we will mention the query. So what query does is, like I tell you previously, all the data in ContentProvider API is stored in a table format. Just like SQL, we also have to write a small query here. So we will use ContentProvider API.query. Then we will write MediaStore.downloads.external content underscore URI. Now what this line will does is, so this line will give you a URI which is basically location of a downloads folder. Next is the array of MediaStore.mediaColumn._id. This line will give us basically the column ID, because once we get the column ID, then we can get the URI using that column ID in the later part of the code. Next is add selection and add argument. Selection simply means we have to select the display column. Display column is basically the file name column in the Media Content Provider API table, and the argument is the file name. We will add the array of file name. So basically what this query is telling Content Provider API is that we have to find the file name inside the column of the display name, and we have to use the MediaStore.downloads.external underscore content underscore URI folder. After running this query, next is the cursor. Once we get the cursor, then we will iterate through it by cursor.move to the first. We will use cursor to get the accurate ID from the media column, and once we get the ID, then we will use that ID to get the actual URI of that file, and that URI will be stored in a URI variable. So this is how we get the URI of that file stored in a download folder. Now once we get the URI of the file, the next is reading the content from the file. Now to read the content from the file, we have to use the same URI and use the ContentResolver.openInputStream. Now previously, when we want to write the data into the file, we have to use the OpenOutputStream. Now here in this case, since we are reading the data from the file, we have to use OpenInputStream, add the URI, and then use the BufferedReader to read the data, and then use .read text, which will convert that data into a string format. And then once we get the data into the string format, we have to display it to the user. So this is how we use the MediaStore API to read the data from the file and write the data into the file and save that file in an external storage folder. External storage folder can be anything such as download photos, music, video, or ringtones. So that's it for the MediaStore API. In the next video, I will teach you how to save and read file from external storage using the Storage Access Framework API. So thank you for watching this video, and if you get value out of this, make sure you like, share and subscribe, and see you in the next video. Have a nice day. Bye bye.